Hey everyone, it's Rob McFarlane here, and today I'm going to show you how Arrival introduces a film the right way. Full disclaimer, there's going to be some spoilers in this one, so if you haven't watched Arrival, please do yourself a favour, go watch Arrival absolutely right now. It is such a stunning film and so worth your time. Cannot recommend it enough. And without further ado, here we go.
I used to think this was the beginning of your story. Memory is a strange thing. It doesn't work like I thought it did. We are so bound by time.
Just in this first line of dialogue, we actually get a hint as to what the main theme of this film is. The words used to, beginning, and story are all words that you could associate with temporality or time. So already he's giving us a clue that this isn't just your ordinary story about someone thinking about someone else. And we talk about memory. But what has this shot got to do with memory? Well, without us even realizing, Denis Villeneuve is trying to show us how he thinks we see time from within our own minds. The Science of Storytelling book actually describes how we ultimately, our brains, our perception is based purely upon looking out through our senses. And if you see, this first shot actually has a completely black room, and we're seeing out through these windows out onto a landscape, wide and thin, almost like a timeline itself. We haven't actually cut away from this beginning shot. No characters have been in the frame. In fact, nothing has actually happened in the frame. So he's really focusing us on this idea of time and our perception of time. And finally we get to see the protagonist, the person whose voice we've already heard. Now, why is it important that instead of showing the protagonist immediately, he instead chose to show us a version of how we see time, how we perceive time? Well, I think what he wanted to do is to set up a filter from which we see the world, from which we see this story through, before we get introduced to the characters that will live within the story. Now, we get to see the protagonist, but we don't cut straight away to what she's looking at. We're more focused on her emotion at the time. This has, again, yet more clues as to the story that will unfold, but never allows us to know too much.
Come back to me. Come back to me. Come back to me.
Stick 'em up!
You see, the focus never travels with the baby to the nurse. Almost like a memory which can't quite come into focus. It's there, but also the definition is not there. We are made to feel like we're being withheld from that perspective. Denis already shown how he is guiding our attention across and through the frame when he wants us to look at something. By not allowing us to see in full definition the nurse, we don't really know or attach ourselves to the nurse as a character. We also don't really know or attach ourselves to the child as a character. We've been forced to get to know the journey and emotions of our main protagonist. But now he gives us a bit of information. This information is really key and subtle. If we go back to the very first shot, you probably will have noticed that there were two wine glasses on the table in the living room looking out across the lake or river. Now we get to see a wedding ring. This wedding band, it doesn't look old, it looks relatively new, so we understand that this is probably quite a new relationship, or they've only just recently gotten married. However, we haven't seen or heard from the husband in any of these shots. He's never been present. He's not been in the wide shot in the living room, nor has he been around her in the hospital room with the child as the mother is dealing with the child. But so far, all we've got is these small vignettes, again reinforcing this idea of the memory, which is going to be another clue as to the story's elements. Yet again, we're not seeing the father figure. The two playing in the field outside, and we recognize that this is probably the very same garden that we were looking out upon from the living room before. So he's not introducing strange and random new places. He's keeping us within spaces that he's getting us to know. He's building out this texture and this world that this woman lives in. We even spend much less time on the daughter than the parent, again reinforcing the emotional journey of the parent over that of the child. We understand, again, she is the protagonist, and what she is going through is what we need to be connected with. Here, where the character is in full view, she's dominant in the frame. We see that she's focused, she's looking at her daughter playing joyfully in the garden, but again it is juxtaposed with this somber music that has not let up. Denis Villeneuve is telling us that this is not a film about happiness. Denis is telling us that this is a film about tragedy. You see how important it is as an introduction to let the audience know what type of film they're going to see before they get into it. Because if you suddenly pivot halfway through your movie, you can leave some of your audience feeling like they've been cheated.
I remember moments in the middle.
I love you. I hate you!
And this was the end.
Come back to me. Baby, come back to me.
You see, in just a handful of shots, we weren't just able to connect with our protagonist and her journey, but we were also able to understand how important her relationship with her daughter was, as well what happened in their lives and how terrible it must have been to go through that. This immediately gets us to feel a connection to our character as we see her suffer through the death of her daughter. He doesn't just leave us on a shot of her crying over the body of her dead daughter. Instead, he leaves us from this introduction down a corridor that curves away, almost as if he's saying, let's rewind. Let's have us go back in time now so we can find out more, without letting us know that we're going back in time. Which leads us, obviously, to the big reveal at the end of the film to understand that what we saw at the beginning was actually a flash forward and not a flash back. So through this imagery, he has given us the theme and moral of this film, and also what it's exploring and the concepts. So the beginning of this film doesn't necessarily introduce us to the concept of aliens and translation and what she's good at, and instead it showed us the world that this character lives within and her major emotional problem that she will have to tackle with in the rest of the film. Check out the link above for another one of my episodes on how to evolve your characters into deep and nuanced characters for your stories. I hope you enjoyed today's breakdown. Hit subscribe, smash like, hit the bell icon, and check out some links below to up your game on your next film.